The sky burned violet above him. Elias sat alone by a dying campfire, the last warmth in a world that didn't want him. The silver trees around him swayed gently, their leaves whispering like a language he could not yet understand. His stomach ached from hunger, his throat dry from days of careful rationing. It had been 12 days since the crash. 12 days since the screaming metal of his ship had torn through the alien atmosphere, burning across the sky like a falling star. He had crawled from the wreckage with bruises on his ribs and a bleeding cut above his brow, but alive. The other crew, they were gone. Elias had spent the first days wandering, hoping to find something familiar, a mother human, a beacon, anything. But there was nothing. The translator device he carried had worked for barely a day before shorting out, giving him only a handful of words from the native language. He clung to them now like lifelines. Night had fallen quickly, the violet light dimming into a deep indigo. His fire was weak, its warmth fading. The alien forest was beautiful, but cruel, full of strange sounds, low growls in the distance, soft footsteps in the underbrush, the rustle of something watching him. And then, he saw her. She appeared between the silver trunks without a sound, as if the forest itself had given birth to her. Tall and slender, her skin glimmered faintly in the moonlight, smooth like polished pearl. Her hair flowed like molten gold over her shoulders, catching the light with every movement. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with menace, but with a strange, unearthly light that made Elias forget to breathe. She carried a spear. Not a crude one, it was elegant, balanced, its tip carved from crystal that shimmered faintly. Her stance was cautious, ready to defend herself, but she didn't raise her weapon. She simply stood there, studying him like one might study a dangerous animal. Elias's heart thudded in his chest. His mouth was dry, but he knew this was his chance. He had no weapons. If she saw him as a threat, he wouldn't survive. He needed her to understand. Digging into his memory, he searched for the fragments of her language the translator had given him. He swallowed, took a deep breath, and spoke slowly, careful not to mispronounce. Peace, no harm. The words felt strange on his tongue, their rhythm foreign, but he saw the reaction instantly. Her eyes widened. She took one step back, as if the sound of her own language coming from his mouth had struck her harder than any weapon could. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Then, she whispered something, in a voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind. "Who are you?" Her tone was not aggressive. It was trembling, as if she were looking at something she couldn't believe was real. Elias hesitated, unsure if she would understand his name. "Elias," he said gently, pressing a hand to his chest. "Human." The glow in her eyes flickered. Her grip tightened on the spear, but she didn't retreat further. She tilted her head, her expression shifting between fear and fascination. He noticed her hands were shaking. Not from cold, he could tell she was afraid, but there was something else there too. It was the way she kept staring at his lips, as if trying to confirm he had truly spoken in her tongue. A breeze rustled through the silver leaves above them, carrying with it the scent of something sweet and strange. Elias felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. He didn't know why his words had affected her so much, but he knew he couldn't waste this fragile chance. Slowly, without standing, he reached for a small piece of dried fruit from his pack and held it out in an open hand, palm upward. A gesture of peace. She didn't take it, but she didn't leave. Instead, she lowered herself slightly, crouching just enough to study him at eye level. Her golden hair spilled forward over one shoulder, catching the firelight. "Elias," she repeated softly, as if testing the sound. Then her voice trembled again. "Why? Can you speak like us?" He wished he had an answer, but all he could do was meet her gaze and say, in her language once more, "I don't know. But I mean no harm." The forest exhaled again, and somewhere, far away, a night beast roared. Neither of them moved. and under the alien moonlight, Elias realized this was no ordinary meeting. Something deep in her reaction told him their worlds had crossed before. Long, long ago. The fire between them hissed softly, sending thin trails of smoke into the alien night. Elias kept his movements slow, careful not to startle her. She still hadn't lowered the spear, but she hadn't run either. She spoke again, her words slow and deliberate, as if testing whether he could follow. Her voice was like cool water calm, but with an undercurrent of tension. Elias caught only fragments. Something about where and how, but the rest slipped past him. He lifted a hand, palm outward. Slow, please. Her golden brows furrowed. She tilted her head, the faint glow in her eyes shifting like candlelight. Then she tried again, this time pausing between each word. You are not from here. That much, he understood. He nodded once. No, I'm from far, very far. She studied him for a long time, as if searching his face for lies. Then, she said a single word, and it struck him like a jolt of electricity. Terran. Elias's breath caught. Terran. That was what his people had been called in old interstellar records. Centuries before human expansion slowed. He had never heard the word spoken aloud by an alien voice. Yes, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Terran. Human. From Terra. Her reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened in shock, and her hands trembled so slightly he almost missed it. She took one slow step back, her spear dipping toward the ground not in surrender, but in uncertainty. Her gaze darted to the strange markings on his jacket, the Earth Space Agency's insignia. She seemed to recognize it, though perhaps only from memory or stories. You, her voice was unsteady. I have heard of your kind. Elias felt his pulse quicken. From where? She hesitated, as though deciding how much to tell him. Old words. From elders. From before my mother's time. She crouched down, touching the earth with her free hand, drawing shapes in the dirt. Elias watched as she traced the outline of a star, then a smaller circle near it. She tapped the smaller circle twice. This. Terra. His mouth went dry. She knew the position of Earth. She knew the name. This was no random meeting. Her people had known of humans before he ever set foot on this world. How? He asked. How? Do you know? Her eyes shifted away, almost as if she were afraid to look at him. Stories. Warnings. They say your kind could speak in all tongues, could walk among us and be understood by all. She hesitated, her voice lowering further. They say, you disappeared after a great fire in the stars. Elias felt a strange chill, despite the fire's warmth. He had no idea what great fire she meant, but the idea that humans had been here long before him made his skin crawl. I'm not one of them, he said quietly. I'm just lost. She studied him again, searching for something in his face. Yet you speak as they did. He almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. A broken translator, a little luck, and a lot of mistakes. For the first time, she smiled barely, a faint curve at the corner of her lips. But it was gone in a heartbeat. The air between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. The night sounds of the forest seemed distant, muffled, as if they too were listening. Finally, she straightened, her spear now resting against her shoulder rather than aimed at him. If you are Terran, then you are not safe here. The words made his stomach twist. Why? She looked into the darkness beyond the fire, her expression guarded. Some will see you as a ghost from the past. Others will see you as a danger that must be destroyed. Elias stared at her, feeling the truth in her tone. And you? What do you see? Her eyes met his, steady now. I don't know yet. The fire cracked softly, and neither of them spoke for a while. But Elias knew her, knowing his origin had changed everything. Whatever path lay ahead, it was no longer just about survival. It was about secrets older than both of them. The night was long, and the fire burned low. Elias sat cross-legged, watching the flames eat the last bits of wood. Saranya, that was her name, he had learned, remained on the other side, silent, her spear resting against her shoulder. She didn't leave. She could have disappeared into the forest without a sound, but she stayed there, her glowing eyes sometimes flicking toward him. After a while, she began to speak. Slowly, carefully, as if telling something precious. Her voice was soft, but carried weight, each word deliberate. Elias had to listen hard to understand her, piecing together meaning from the fragments of her language. He knew. She spoke of her people, how they had lived under these silver trees for countless generations, their lives bound to the rhythm of the twin moons and the violet sky. But her voice lowered when she began to speak of the old time. In that time, the sky had been filled with fire. Not the kind that burned forests, but a fire that burned the heavens themselves. Ships had fallen like meteors, strange machines had darkened the clouds, and voices from the stars had filled the air. Her people called those voices the walkers of all tongues. They were not like other visitors. They spoke every word as if they were born to it, no matter which people they stood before. They could speak, Saranya said, her gaze fixed on the flames, and everyone would listen, not because of power, not because of fear, but because their words felt true. Elias felt a strange shiver. It sounded like a myth, but something in her tone told him she believed it as truth. "What happened to them?" he asked. Saranya hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around her spear. "The elders say there was a war. Not here, but in the dark between stars. The walkers fought with another people, those who feared their voices. When the war ended, the walkers were gone. Their ships never returned. Only the stories stayed." She looked at him then, her eyes glimmering in the firelight. "Some say they became ghosts, wandering the void. Others say they hid, waiting for the right time to return." Elias's throat was dry. "And now you think I am one of them?" Her gaze didn't waver. "You speak as they did." He wanted to argue, to tell her he was nothing more than a stranded pilot who had gotten lucky with a few words. But the way she looked at him made him stop. This wasn't about him proving who he was. This was about what he represented to her. The silence stretched between them. Only the distant sounds of the forest filled the air, a low hum of insects, the soft call of some unseen creature. Saranya's eyes softened slightly, but her voice carried a weight that made his chest feel tight. "The stories are not all filled with hope, Elias. Some say the walkers brought change, and change brought death. Some say our people lost much because of them." He frowned. "So, you don't know if I am a good sign or a bad one?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know only that you are different, and different things can break a people." Elias looked away, staring into the dark beyond the fire. He thought of Earth, of the wreckage of his ship, of the fact that he had nowhere else to go. He didn't want to be anyone's symbol. He just wanted to survive. But a part of him couldn't help wondering, what if the old stories were true? What if humans had been here before, long ago? Saranya stood suddenly, her golden hair catching the moonlight. "Come," she said softly. Elias looked up at her in confusion. "Where?" "To water," she replied, "and to show you something." She didn't explain further. She simply began to walk, her steps silent on the forest floor. Elias hesitated for a moment, then rose and followed. The forest closed in around them, the silver trunks glowing faintly under the moons. He could see her shape ahead of him, moving with the grace of someone who belonged to this place. Whatever she was about to show him, Elias knew it would change the way he saw this world and perhaps himself. The forest was quiet, except for the soft crunch of their steps. Elias followed Saranya through the silver trees, the pale moonlight casting long shadows across the ground. She moved ahead of him with silent confidence, her golden hair glowing. faintly in the dim light. They had walked for almost an hour before the sound of running water reached his ears. It was a soft, gentle sound, soothing after days of thirst and worry. When they broke through a patch of tall grass, Elias saw a clear stream winding through the forest, its surface shimmering with the reflection of the twin moons. Serenia knelt by the bank and cupped the water in her hands. She drank slowly, then gestured for him to do the same. Elias dropped to his knees and scooped up the water. It was cold, pure, and the sweetest thing he had tasted since the crash. For a moment, there was only silence between them. Then Serenia spoke, her voice low. "This place is safe. No hunters come here." He understood enough of her words to piece together the meaning. Hunters. She nodded. Beasts, and others. Her eyes darkened slightly at the last word. They stayed by the stream for a while, letting the night pass in calm stillness. But even in the quiet, Elias could feel the weight of unspoken things between them, questions neither dared to ask yet. After a long pause, Serenia turned toward him. "You learn fast." Elias looked up from the water. "Learn what?" "My tongue," she said simply. "When we met, you spoke only little. Now, more." He smiled faintly. "I listen." Something softened in her eyes. She glanced away, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Most outsiders do not listen. They only talk. Elias thought of the stories she had told him the night before, stories of the walkers of all tongues. If humans really had been here before, maybe they hadn't all been as careful as he was trying to be. "I don't want to be like them," he said quietly. Serenia's head turned toward him again. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice held a faint tremor. "Then why does it feel the same?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. They began walking again, heading deeper into the forest. She pointed out plants along the way, telling him which were safe to eat and which would burn the mouth or cause sickness. Elias repeated the names after her, sometimes stumbling over the strange sounds, earning the faintest hint of a smile from her. By the time they reached a small clearing, the moons were higher, bathing everything in silver light. Serenia stopped and turned to him. "Here," she said, "I will show you how to keep the shadow beasts away." From her belt, she took a small pouch of fine gray powder. She walked in a slow circle around the clearing, sprinkling it into the grass. "They smell this." They turn away. Elias crouched down to look at it. "What is it?" She glanced at him with a small, secretive smile. "You do not need to know that yet." When she finished, she sat on a low rock, her spear resting across her knees. Elias sat nearby, the cool night air wrapping around them. For the first time since meeting her, she seemed at ease. Her posture relaxed, and her gaze wandered up to the stars. "When I was a child," she said softly, "I dreamed of leaving this place. I wanted to see the other worlds my mother spoke of. But the elders say the stars are dangerous. They say they take more than they give." Elias followed her gaze. "Sometimes they do, but sometimes they give us more than we expect." She looked at him then, and for a moment, her guarded expression broke. There was something almost vulnerable in her eyes. "Elias," she said quietly, "my people fear your kind. They say you bring change. Change can break us." He met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to break anything. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go." The wind shifted, rustling the grass around them. Serenia studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Then, maybe, I will help you stay." It wasn't a promise, but for Elias, it was the first step toward something like trust. The morning came with pale light spilling through the silver leaves. Elias awoke to the sound of quiet footsteps, too many to be Serenia alone. His eyes snapped open, and before he could sit up, figures emerged from the trees. There were 6 of them, tall, armored in dark plates that gleamed faintly, their faces partly hidden behind masks carved from bone. Each carried a spear like Serenia's, though theirs were aimed, not resting. Serenia stood near the edge of the clearing, her back to them, her stance rigid. Elias could see the tension in her shoulders. One of the warriors barked something sharp in their language. Elias didn't understand all the words, but he caught enough to know they were asking about him. Serenia answered quickly, her voice calm but firm. The warrior replied, his tone rising, his hand tightening on his weapon. Elias could feel the hostility in every syllable. Another stepped forward and jabbed a finger toward Elias. The meaning was clear. They wanted him to stand. Elias rose slowly, keeping his hands where they could see them. He tried to speak, to say peace again, but one of the warriors snarled and moved closer, rope-like bindings in hand. Serenia stepped in front of him. "No," she said sharply, her voice ringing through the clearing. The warriors hesitated, clearly shocked by her defiance. She spoke again, her words fast and urgent. Elias caught fragments. Not enemy, alone, safe. But whatever she said didn't convince them. The leader took a step forward, his eyes narrowing behind the mask. He gestured, and two warriors moved to grab Elias. Elias felt rough hands seize his arms. The rope-thin glowing strands that burned faintly against his skin were wrapped around his wrists. He could feel a strange hum in them, like they were alive. He glanced at her jaw was tight, her hands clenched. "Do not fight," she said quickly. "You will not win." He let them bind him. He had no weapon, no way to resist. But the cold certainty in the warrior's movements told him this was not a welcome bay, or taking him as a prisoner. They pushed him forward, leading him through the forest. Serenia walked beside him, her spear still in hand, though the others kept a close watch on her. As they moved, Elias whispered, "Where are they taking me?" "To the elders," she replied. "They will decide." Her tone made it clear this was not good news. The walk to the village was long and tense. The silver forest gave way to a wide valley, where structures rose from the earth like giant shells, their surfaces etched with flowing patterns. Smoke curled from vents at the top of some, carrying the smell of cooking fires. People gathered as they entered, men, women, and children, all stopping to stare. The sight of Elias drew whispers and fearful glances. Some stepped back, clutching their children close, while others simply watched with unreadable eyes. Elias kept his gaze forward, trying not to appear threatening, but the weight of their stares pressed down on him, and the bindings around his wrists seemed to tighten. Finally, they reached the largest structure in the village, a wide, domed hall, with carved pillars at its entrance. The warriors shoved him inside. The air was cooler here, filled with the faint scent of herbs. At the far end of the hall, 3 figures sat on raised seats, their robes flowing like water. Their faces were uncovered, their skin pale like moonlight, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. These were the elders. Serenia stepped forward before the warriors could speak. She bowed her head briefly, then began speaking rapidly, her voice carrying urgency and conviction. Elias caught his name in the middle of her speech, along with words like "not danger" and "trust." The elders listened without interrupting. When she finished, one turned his gaze toward Elias. The elder spoke slowly, clearly, so Elias could understand. "You are Terran." Elias swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, human, from Terra." The hall went utterly silent. Even the warriors seemed frozen. The elders exchanged glances that spoke of something heavy, knowledge, perhaps even fear. When the oldest among them spoke again, his voice was cold. "If you are truly Terran, then you are the shadow of an old curse, and we do not allow curses to remain." The elder's words struck Elias like a physical blow. A curse. That was how they saw him, not as a man, not as someone in need, but as a shadow of something they feared. 2 warriors stepped forward, their spears angled toward him. The glowing ropes around his wrists pulsed faintly, and Elias felt a strange numbness creeping into his hands. But before they could move closer, Serenia stepped into their path. Her spear rose in a sharp, defiant motion. "No," she said, her voice steady, but loud enough to echo in the hall. The elders' glowing eyes fixed on her. "Serenia," the oldest one said slowly, "you know what he is. You know what the stories say." "I know the stories," she replied, her gaze never wavering, "and I know fear has twisted them. He is not what you think." The elders' expression hardened. "Would you put your life against the word of the elders?" "Yes," Serenia said without hesitation. "If he dies here, I will die with him." Gasps rippled through the gathered villagers. Even the warriors froze, unsure of how to react. Ilias's chest tightened at her words. One of the younger elders leaned forward. "You would tie your fate to his, to a Terran." "I already have," she said softly, but the strength in her voice was unshakable. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting Elias's. "Tell them," she urged. "Tell them why you are here." Elias took a deep breath, forcing himself to speak in their language as best he could. "I came because I had no choice. My ship fell from the sky. My people are far away. I do not want to take. I do not want to harm. I only want a place to live." His voice was not perfect. He stumbled over words. His accent heavy, but the sincerity in it was clear. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then the oldest elder said, "Words are easy. Trust is hard. The last time your kind walked among us, the ground burned and rivers dried. Change came like a flood, and our people were left broken." Elias shook his head. "I am not them. I am only me." Serenia stepped forward again. "Elders, you say he is danger, but I have seen him with no weapon, no army, no hate. I have seen him listen to our tongue when most would only speak their own. He has shared fire with me, walked our lands with care, and learned our ways." Her voice grew sharper. "If you cannot see the difference between one man and the ghosts of the past, then you are blind to the truth standing before you." The warriors shifted uncomfortably. The villagers, who had gathered at the edges of the hall, murmured to one another. Elias could see some of their faces changing, no longer purely hostile, but uncertain. The oldest elder's eyes narrowed. "You speak boldly for one so young." "I speak because I must," Serenia answered. "If you kill him, you kill more than a man. You kill the chance for something new, for peace." Her words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unshakable. Finally, the elders leaned toward one another, their voices low and impossible to hear. They spoke for a long time, while Elias stood still, the glowing bindings humming against his wrists. When they finally straightened, the oldest elder's voice was calm but cold. "We will not kill him, but he will not walk free. He will live under watch, among us, until we are certain his presence does not bring ruin." Relief washed over Elias like a wave. He was alive, but the weight of their distrust was still heavy. Serenia lowered her spear, though her shoulders remained tense. "Then it is decided," she said. The warrior stepped forward, cutting the glowing ropes from Elias's wrists. The numbness faded slowly, replaced by the faint ache of freedom. As the crowd began to disperse, Serenia came to his side. Her voice was quiet, meant only for him. "You are safe. For now." Elias met her gaze. "Because of you." She didn't smile, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Because I believe you." And in that moment, Elias knew whatever came next, she was no longer just his guide. She was his ally. Days passed, then weeks. Elias learned quickly that being allowed to live among Serenia's people did not mean they welcomed him. When he walked through the village, voices would quiet. Conversations stopped. Children peeked from behind doorways, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. He spent his days helping with whatever work they would out, carrying water, repairing fishing nets, gathering herbs from the forest. Most tasks were given with few words, and sometimes his presence. was met with cold stares. But Elias did them anyway, without complaint. Serenia stayed close, often walking beside him. She taught him more of their language, correcting his words gently, sometimes laughing when he said something wrong. Her laughter was a small light in the heavy air around them. At night, they would sit by the fire outside her home. She told him the old stories of her people, stories of a time before the war with the Terrans, when trade and friendship existed between worlds. Elias listened carefully, trying to picture it. A world where a man like him would not have to hide behind someone's protection. One evening, an elder's child came running into the village, crying out that the river had flooded near the southern farms. The villagers rushed to help, carrying tools and ropes. Elias followed without being asked. The water was high and fast, pulling at the edges of the fields. Wooden barriers had broken, and the crops were at risk of being swept away. Elias waded into the cold water without hesitation, using his strength to lift heavy beams and push them back into place. Others watched him at first with suspicion, but when the current nearly pulled a young man under, Elias was the one who grabbed him and pulled him to safety. By the time the barriers were repaired and the water slowed, Elias's clothes were soaked, his hands raw from rope burns. But the farmers looked at him differently now. One older man gave a slow nod, not a smile, but something close to respect. Later, Serenia found him sitting by the riverbank, catching his breath. "You didn't have to help," she said softly. "Yes," Elias replied, looking out at the dark water. "I did." That night, no one turned him away when he walked past their fires. Some even greeted him with short nods. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between them. Weeks turned into months. Elias built small things for the village: stronger fishing hooks, better fire pits, tools shaped from scrap metal he found in the forest. He traded these for food and cloth, and slowly, the villagers began to speak to him without Serenia there to guide the conversation. One morning, as he repaired the roof of the gathering hall, the oldest elder approached. The man studied him for a long moment before speaking. "The ground has not burned," the elder said quietly. "The rivers still run. Perhaps the stories were wrong about all your kind." Elias did not argue. He simply nodded. "I am only one man," he said, "but I am here to stay." That night, the entire village gathered for the first spring feast. Serenia invited him to sit beside her, in a place close to the elders. The air was warmer, the mood lighter. Laughter rose around the fire. At one point, Serenia leaned close and whispered, "Do you remember the first words you spoke to me?" "In my tongue." Elias smiled faintly. "Who are you?" She nodded. "I think I am still learning the answer. And perhaps you are too." He looked at her, the firelight dancing in her eyes, and felt something he hadn't felt since he left. His home world belonging. When the feast ended, some of the villagers clapped him on the shoulder. A few even called his name. He knew not everyone accepted him, but now, when he walked the village paths, the silence had lifted. Elias glanced at Serenia as they walked back to her home under the starlit sky. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For not letting me be alone." She gave a rare, gentle smile. "You never were." And though the path ahead was still uncertain, Elias knew that somewhere between the first word he spoke in her language and this moment, by her side, he had found something worth staying for.